something about UCLA. You made the outstanding prediction that they're going to beat Utah.
Beat Utah.
No, 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 no.
Welcome to OurSport. I'm your host, Larry. John, as always, doing the recording and editing. So we have a lot to talk about. Some monumental events happen in college football this week, including Tua Tagovailoa's injury. That's the biggest story. But we're going to start with something else, which is, and if you watched it, you saw it. You saw the death of a football program. Michigan State football died Saturday in the Big House against the Wolverines. So let me explain why I say this. If you look at any program's ability to be sustainable, it's all about recruiting. It's all about talent acquisition. How can I get talent to my program? That's the biggest determinant to how good your football program could be. And usually the biggest factor in recruiting is proximity. How close is the surrounding talent within, say, a 5 or 6 hour period from where my campus is? That dictates a lot of how much the players want to come to your school. That's usually their biggest factor. They want to be close because their family can see the games. They can still stay close to home, with exceptions, of course. So, now stay with me here, okay? I'm going somewhere with this. If you look back to the 50s and 60s, football was different. All the power for football, college football, was in the Midwest. Michigan State was a dominant team. Won national championships under Big E Munn, 1951-52. Won national championships under Duffy Daugherty in 65-66. Purdue had strong programs in the 60s. The usual powers were the usual powers. Notre Dame, Penn State started to emerge. The point is, the north part of the country, the Midwest part of the country, was sustainable. It was able to have 6 or 7 or 8 power programs back then for 2 reasons. One, those programs are integrated. They could go to the South and get some of the black players that the Southern schools were not allowed to get. Bubba Smith, I think he was like the number 1, 2, or 2 pick in a draft. I think he came from Mississippi, went to Michigan State. A dominant player, college football Hall of Famer. And they got players like this because the Southern teams couldn't. That's one factor. Another is the population. The population in the United States was, a greater percentage of it was more centered in the Midwest. So you could have multiple dominant programs in that area. Now, what's happened? What happened is the South integrated. All those players didn't have to go from Mississippi, 800 miles north of Michigan. They could go to Mississippi State. They could go to Alabama. They could go to LSU. What else happened? Jobs started to leave. People started to leave. The population center of the United States switched. More people migrated from the north to the south and vice versa. And so what happens? You can see it. You can see programs out of the blue start to emerge. In the 80s, Miami emerged. Florida State emerged. In the 90s, Florida probably finally lived up to its potential. LSU is a power now, to the point where they really weren't until like the 50s. They were downtrodden for a long time. Look at Clemson. All these programs are in the South now. So, the North can still sustain a certain number of high-level teams. It's possible. But what's the limit? Probably 4, I would guess. And we know those 4. We know who those 4 are. It's easy. It's Notre Dame, it's Michigan, it's Ohio State, and it's Penn State.
A little bit of Wisconsin in there too.
A little bit of Wisconsin. Wisconsin's a little different because they're really sort of an outlier. They overcome their recruiting rankings, and they tend to develop players at a better rate than most teams. They have something going on there inside their program that enables them to compete like this. Enter Mark D'Antonio at Michigan State. Mark D'Antonio was not necessarily a great recruiter. Now, recruiting isn't everything. It's a huge part of your success, but you have to have the ability to evaluate players properly and to develop players properly. There are coaches out there who cannot do this. They can recruit well, and they don't maybe evaluate or develop their players. This might be the case with Tom Herman in Texas. This may be even the case at Georgia with Kirby Smart. It might be a stretch, but boy, Georgia is loaded, and they don't dominate quite as much as a completely loaded team would. But D'Antonio had an excellent ability to evaluate and develop players. So here he comes. And he comes in right at the time where Michigan has a coaching search, and they go to Rich Rodriguez. You have to talk about these two programs because Michigan State is intertwined with Michigan, their fate. Michigan is not necessarily intertwined with Michigan State, but Michigan State, a lot of it depends on the state of the Wolverines. It's their in-state program. So he took recruiting over from the Wolverines. He didn't dominate them, but he got a lot of the players because Rich Rodriguez did not recruit properly to Michigan. So here he comes in his first 4 or 5 or 6 years, and Mark D'Antonio starts building an elite program. They start dominating their rivals in state. They start humiliating the Wolverines. He made that a red letter game. He specifically went out of his way. He used that as fuel. And he got some recruits that the Wolverines couldn't enough. He also developed them. He was not a great recruiter, necessarily. He was good enough because this program is difficult to recruit to. This is a hard program to recruit to. Before D'Antonio, there was Nick Saban. As great a coach as Saban is one of the greatest recruiters of all time. This goes together with his ability to build a program. He couldn't recruit well to Michigan State, not like he wanted. He had limited success by his standards. Bunch of 6-6, 7-5 years. The minute he was 9-2, he was out of there. It's hard to think of Nick Saban going 4 or 5 years in a row somewhere and going 6-6. That's because he said this. He was frustrated. He goes, I cannot get players in state. I cannot win these recruiting battles. Lloyd Carr is a tepid recruiter, and he's just hauling in players left and right. There was one of the in-state players, I think it was James Ross, who I believe so. He was a long-time Michigan State lean. The last minute he went to Michigan. He says all the best players in Michigan played for the Wolverines. We all know that. This is what you're fighting at this place. That your own ability to recruit in-state is so severely limited. D'Antonio could mitigate this because he could do enough and he could find and develop players like no other coach could. Now, his recruiting has slipped even more than normal. The emergence of Penn State does not help. He has gone from a second-tier recruiting school to perhaps a third-tier recruiting school. And he cannot also, the in-state program, his rival, is back with a coach who can recruit to his proper capability. That started actually under Brady Hoke, who had limited success off the field, but at least could recruit. So the damage was starting to be done before this season. D'Antonio gave this program and its fans what they really wanted: pride. They had so much pride in their program. All the mockery that they suffered, all the belittling at the hands of the Wolverines, they shoved that in their face. They didn't just beat them, they beat them in humiliating ways. The negative 48 yards rushing game for Devin Gardner. And this is not really a supportive football school. This team was number 2 in the country and had trouble selling out their stadium. They loved D'Antonio for this. Even at their peak, they still could not live up to the level of bad Michigan teams down the street. Again, these programs are connected, so you have to talk about them this way. And Michigan State fans, what they're most afraid of, they're not afraid of being irrelevant because they have, before this, the fans with any kind of memory are used to the fact that they know what the program is. They're kind of similar to Purdue, where they'll have some good years, they'll have some 6-6 type years. That's not what they're afraid of. They're afraid of mockery. They're afraid of being taunted. They don't talk about any of the poor coaches in the past. They always refer the Michigan State fans to the John L. Smith era, because John L. Smith's record was kind of similar to other Michigan State coaches, but John L. Smith invented strange ways to lose. He acted in a very buffoonish way.
Cannot believe what is happening. Let's go to Jack.
Coach, obviously a miscalculation there, and you're upset. Tell me about it.
Very upset. We should have been in a ball game with fast field goal. The coach had sent him in. We shouldn't have sent him in. That's a dang coaching mistake. The kids are playing their tail off, and the coaches are screwing it up.
Don't have to say any more than that, Brent.
No, you certainly don't, Jack. Very honest assessment.
And so not only when you lost on Saturday, the game was not forgotten. When you lost on Saturday, it's like, oh, they lost, moved on. No, what happens is when you lost on Saturday, why you lost and how you lost, because it was so strange and so bizarre, was brought up over and over again. That's what Michigan State is afraid of. They're afraid of going back to being regarded as a clown program, a cartoonish program. That's what worries them the most. So that's a hard atmosphere to get a coach into. So in closing, what do you have? This is the entire totality of it. You have a program without a great fan base. Even when you're number 2 in the country, they don't show up to support you. You have a program that is not capable of great recruiting, or maybe even good recruiting right now, and has to rely on a coach who can really, really find hidden gems. Find 2-star players that nobody knows about, 3-star players. That's difficult. D'Antonio was very rare in his ability to do this. A coach like Gary Patterson could do this. There's not many who can do that. And if you don't have that, you're just a program now. You're just back to what you always were. You're back to what they're afraid of. Sparty no. That meme is back. Spartan will. That hashtag is gone. Sparty no. That hashtag might be alive and well. And this started really a couple of years ago. The Michigan State fans, and really I was having a hard time believing it because they were so dominant and so tough for so long. They're so hard to beat and played really with such ferocity at times. But it's clear now, those days are gone. The program is done. They're not going to be able to recover from this, and really maybe for decades. The biggest story of the weekend, probably the biggest story of the year, was Alabama's quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa, going down for the year with a dislocated hip. This is going to affect the playoff rankings because you can't put Alabama in here. You can't put this team with what is essentially a third-string quarterback in the playoff. You just can't. They'll find a way to maneuver to the playoff committee to get them out of the rankings. I guarantee you. They'll find a way to put maybe even a 2-win conference champ like Oregon or Utah ahead of them. This becomes politics now, which is always a bit of the rankings. Now, if you go back and you look to the week 1 episode we mentioned this. We mentioned this specifically, that this was going to be a factor to the fate of a college football team this year. We said one of these elite powerhouse programs that has depth at quarterback doesn't have depth at quarterback anymore. And Jalen Hurts, 15 years ago, Alabama would have had Jalen Hurts as their backup quarterback. He would have stayed and been behind Tua Tagovailoa. And you put Jalen Hurts on this team, you still got a pretty good shot to make a run at the national title. You drop off, but certainly not precipitously, maybe barely. Well, they don't have that. Jalen Hurts is over there in Norman, Oklahoma. The transfer portal, all the 5-star quarterbacks that don't want to sit behind another 5-star quarterback. We said this in our week 1 episode. You check the timestamp. It's exactly what we talked about, that this would affect the team. It also puts Clemson and Ohio State in danger, especially Ohio State. Justin Fields is a Heisman-level quarterback, Heisman finalist-level quarterback. If he goes down, they could beat maybe Penn State. They could beat maybe Michigan. They can't beat Clemson without that quarterback. They can't beat LSU without that quarterback. LSU might not be able to beat Ohio State without their quarterback. And if you look at how all these quarterbacks transfer from one place to another, it's been a pretty well documented story. Ohio State's backup quarterback, he's over there playing for LSU. This rotating series of backup quarterbacks is going to drastically change the fate of college football programs. It's going to drastically affect who can win a national title. You could be the number 1 team in the country, and your season could be gone like that because one quarterback injury You don't have the depth you had before. You can have 10 4- and 5-star defensive linemen like Ohio State does. That's fine. You lose that quarterback, you're dropping 3, 4, 5 notches. You look at a roster at Ohio State, you see who the backup quarterbacks are, you see where they came from. They're not anywhere near the level of the starter. And it's not exclusive to them. Quarterback depth is going to be the rarest luxury in college football from now on. All right, I'm going to bring John in here. We're going to talk some NFL. He's our NFL guy. Let's talk about the disaster that was the Browns-Steelers game. Myles Garrett goes off and decides to hit Mason Rudolph over the head with his own helmet. I'll say this about Myles Garrett. I follow him. We follow the draft as much as anything else. We are really in tune to these prospects. And some of the things he was talking about coming out seemed very odd, very much like a soft football player in the making. I like archaeology. I like poetry. That's fine. I'm not against those things. But that really doesn't correlate with a defensive end who just wants to take the head off a quarterback. And then I started watching him this year, some preseason, and okay, I got to admit, that guy flips a switch when he gets on the field. That guy had a take no prisoners attitude. It's exactly what you wanted from a defensive player. Just dominating players and being chippy, hitting them a little late. I kind of like that. That's old school defensive football. Yeah. It's man balls, the way it should be.
Yeah.
There's a limit. There's a limit.
For sure.
Now, they're starting to talk about Mason Rudolph, that he had a hand in this because he didn't like being sacked. You know, tough pretty boy. You're a quarterback. You're going to get sacked. And then he started grabbing Myles Garrett's face mask at the bottom of the pile. But you can't do what Myles Garrett did. You can't use your helmet as a weapon. I mean, much as it must have been fun to hit Mason Rudolph over the head with his own helmet, you cannot do it. So I guess the game just got to him, and he just got a little bit overboard.
Yeah, a little bit overboard to say the least.
Right.
But when you were talking about Myles Garrett, I like archaeology. That reminds me a lot of Josh Rosen. He did much of the same things in the interviews. He talked about space and blood diamonds and all these other things. And in the NFL, he's turned out to be, well, not great.
He's been
and
terrible.
so, it does. There is a correlation between that. And you can see how when you have a player who, is not entirely focused on football or seems like, he's got a little bit of that softness in him, it does a lot of times correlate to not great play on the field.
Right. And they talked about, I remember Myron Rolle was a Rhodes Scholar. And he wanted to be a neurosurgeon. And of course he had many interests. And don't get us wrong. We're not saying you shouldn't have interests off the field. I mean, John's an honor student. John has things he's interested in. John's not an NFL defensive lineman. Okay? And you can have all that, but Myron Rolle, Rhodes Scholar that he was, brilliant person. Scouts questioned him, like, is he really focused on football? And the announcers, who were completely getting it wrong, were like, well, you can't have a person who's interested in other things and be smart and still be in football. No, sure you can. But that's what it was. That was not his main interest. And at the professional level, when you're working 100-hour work weeks against other professionals who are there to kick your ass, that has to be your top focus.
Yep.
Yeah.
It has to be the only thing you're focused on. This is professional. This isn't college anymore. This is the big boy league.
No.
And apparently Myles Garrett is. He's focused.
Maybe too focused. He's going to be suspended for the whole season. I think that's appropriate. You can't do what he did. He definitely crossed the line. And he immediately went from the chippy, tough guy, defensive end now to 8th stage Vontaze Perfect.
8th stage?
Right.
It's like the stages of Vontaze.
Well, yeah, because he kept getting suspended and fined over and over and over again. And so
first stage of Vontaze is just a little shove.
Well, no.
Once you get to 8th stage of Vontaze Perfect,
what I mean is like
assault.
His first, attempt to decapitate somebody on the field, which Vontaze Perfect did. The first time he tried to literally assassinate somebody, was like, oh, he's just playing good football. And by the time he got fined for the 32nd time, people were like, there's something wrong with this man.
30 seconds. There's 32 stages of Vontaze Perfect?
But he was...
This is only stage 8?
Well, I mean, like, the awareness. Like, the eyes on him now are... He can't hit a quarterback late now. He's going to get every flag in the world.
Yeah.
And so, I got a feeling he's still going to play reckless, ferocious. It was fun to watch. It was fun to watch while it lasted. Hopefully, it didn't take this away from him. Also, I have to point out, Josh Rhodes is a quarterback.
Yeah.
Quarterbacks are pretty boys, right?
It doesn't matter.
That's all quarterbacks are, a bunch of pretty boys. look at me. I'm throwing the ball. By the way, he was a quarterback in flag football, so I know what I'm talking about. That's all they are. Bunch of pretty boys. They like the attention. They don't like to be hit by the big, bad defensive lineman. The defensive linemen are where football's won. Quarterback. Argue with me. There you go.
So, moving on.
Moving on.
Myles Garrett, it does remind me a little bit of, from the same position, what Ndamukong Kongsu used to do a little bit, where he used to step on people under the pile. It's very similar in nature, the late penalties and things like that.
That's a good point.
And he stopped. He's calmed it down a little bit.
Yeah.
He's not been like that anymore. He might have to do that as well. He might have to calm that down because all eyes are going to be on him, like you said.
And this is a team, the Browns, man, they have a lot of talent. And, talent seems to be their major focus. We're going to get talented players. Anything to what they can do off the field, any kind of problems, any kind of locker room lawyer issues, it's going to be completely disregarded. They finally cut Antonio Callaway this week. That guy was a first-round talent out of Florida receiver. He might have been, I think, a fifth or sixth-round pick. And guy was running his routes wrong. Guy was sleeping in meetings. And when the guy has that much talent and he's in a receiver room, maybe not in that receiver room because that receiver room is loaded with talent.
Yeah.
That receiver room is not out of locker room lawyers.
No.
No.
And when you do that as a general manager, whoever making the decisions in terms of trades and drafting,
John
at
Dorsey.
the Browns, John Dorsey.
Right.
When you do that, you need a hard ass coach. Your coach needs to be able to control that. And I don't know if you can control that, but you need like a Bill Belichick, no bullshit kind of coach, where when you have to be able to command that locker room, you have to be able to get those guys under control.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of them in Cleveland. And they can take over your power.
And that's not what Freddie Kitchens is.
No.
He is not a disciplined coach. You have to, and that really has to start with a coach that has some experience, maybe. The coach has accomplished something. Freddie Kitchens, this is first, he's doing on-the-job training. He was not a head coach before this. It's hard for the players to respect him. And you're talking about discipline, you're exactly right. Guess who leads the league in penalties?
I'm going to say the Browns.
It's the Browns.
Ah, ding, ding, ding.
That was even before the Myles Garrett shit show. Even before that, they were known for this. The whole year so far this year, they're losing games because they're not disciplined. They're just not a disciplined team. Running the wrong assignments at the receiver position, false starts by the offensive line, things like this.
Yeah. You look at. We were watching the Patriots game, the Browns Patriots game, and they had that 3 offensive plays in a row on separate drives.
Oh my God.
It was the worst. So. Backstory, Nick Chubb last year didn't fumble once.
He did fumble one time.
He didn't fumble one time. He was one of the most secure ball handlers. And he gets the ball, and the guard gets pushed back, and his leg kicks up in the air, and hits Nick Chubb's arm, and he fumbles the ball.
Right.
And the Patriots get it.
Yeah.
And then
I'm not even sure that was Chubb. That might have been the backup, but you get the point. Right. It's just an odd way to.
The next offensive drive. The next offensive play. For the Browns, right? They get the ball, hands it off. Chubb, huge hole. He's running down the sideline, 74. No, nothing. Because corner safety, Patrick Chung, I think? I don't know. Someone comes up from behind him with the fist technique and just hits the ball as hard as they can.
Yeah.
Pops right out of his hands. The very next offensive play for Cleveland, the next drive, because they turned it over, right? Baker Mayfield takes it. Goes for like a pitch to, I think, Jarvis Landry.
It was a shovel.
A shovel, something like that, where it's like a jet sweep type action. Straight to the Patriots defensive lineman. Just right to him.
Yeah. That's bad discipline. That's bad. The one with the foot kicking up is bad luck.
That's bad luck.
But you want to talk about, discipline is detail. It's detail-oriented. Maybe if Chubb is running like this, and a guy comes up behind him, and he's slapping at the ball, it might not come out. But when you ball your fist up, all these little details matter in football. Cleveland is known for detail, and that alone gave them a chance because you punching at the ball, and even a back who could secure the ball like Chubb, that's one of the few ways you can get out of his hands. And discipline is about detail as much as anything else. And boy, this is not a detailed or disciplined football team.
Nope, and it's complete opposites in that game because the Patriots are probably the most detail-oriented, disciplined team in the league
For a decade.
for a long time,
Right.
2 decades.
2 decades.
And you had it was just a combination of undisciplined and discipline. And they have a lot of issues. They're really talented. And at the beginning of the year, people were saying playoffs, and we're really excited for this team. but they have a lot of issues that they need to figure out.
And I'll tell you what they could use. They could really use a grown-up at quarterback.
Yeah.
You have a team like this, you want a grown-up to you want somebody to be the grown-up that you can look at who's a calming influence, who's a steady influence, who's going to get all these personalities in line and say, hey, we have a job to do, we have practice to go to, we got it. Baker he's looking like a bust. Baker's looking like a bust right now.
Yeah, Baker's not playing. He was a winner in college, He went out there and in the big game, he played the best. You look at the Georgia game. That game went to overtime.
Baller.
He played incredible. When the game was at its most important place, he would play the best.
He did what nobody could do. He went into Ohio State against the Urban Meyer team, dominated that game.
Yeah.
Nobody does that to a Urban Meyer.
Yeah,
No.
Unless you're Iowa.
Unless you're
completely
Iowa,
off
so,
topic.
yeah.
But
No, but that game was in Columbus too.
yeah.
Yeah, the flag planting game. That's incredible. That blew them out in their own stadium. Was Urban Meyer ever blown out at Ohio State in his own stadium?
I don't know.
No.
I don't know.
Go.
Off topic.
Off topic. Yeah,
He's in the NFL the complete opposite of that. He's not played well. He's not, and I mean, last year he actually did have some times, but this year he has played completely terrible.
Reckless.
He's reckless, and a lot of that juvenileness that we saw in college is resurfacing again.
Yeah.
The just doing stupid things,
On the field.
off the field,
Yeah.
both.
Yelling at a reporter or storming off at a reporter, asking him a hard question. It's not Iowa State out there. It's not Kansas. These are professionals, and I can tell you this for a fact. The one thing professional football players are least impressed with is what you were in college. They don't care at all if you were a Heisman Trophy winner or first-round pick until you prove to them you're a professional player. That's how you get their respect. And he can have all the accolades you want coming out of college. NFL players are looking forward to playing them. They said this before. This started from the Titans game, the first game of the year. They had heard the hype for 6 months. They couldn't wait to play him.
This is professional athletes versus professional athletes, and they take it as an insult when you say this team's great, this team's gonna win, they take that personally because they work 100 hours a week too.
Right.
They are professionals. They are one of the top 1,000 people in the world at doing what they do.
Yeah.
And when you say, you don't have a chance, they take that personally.
Yeah, they don't like it when you forecast the win before they even suited up.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. So the Browns are a disaster. Good job, John. Thank you.
All right.
So here's the OurSport Top 10. I thought hard about putting Ohio State number 1. They're going to have a chance next week to play a Penn State team. It's really good, and they're our number 7 team right now. LSU has got flaws. This has been obvious all year. Their defense is leaky. But Joe Burrow is a killing machine. He is unbelievable, this guy. And he's playing at a level that, I don't know, maybe peak Trevor Lawrence last year. We've only seen it. It's been all the way since a whole year ago since we've seen somebody play like this. He's fantastic. He can carry that whole team and maybe overcome his own defense. Now, Georgia, I'm not high on. I've never bought Georgia. Any kind of viewers to this show will know that. I think that right now there are 3 teams that can legitimately win the national championship. They are top 3. I don't think the other teams can. And a quarterback injury to one of these 3 teams changes everything. None of them have the depth to survive a quarterback injury against a playoff team. Clemson could roll John out at quarterback and beat South Carolina. That's not the game that's not the game that's going to keep them from winning the national championship. So it's when these teams have their matchups against other playoff teams of equitable caliber, good word, that can they match up quarterback for quarterback. I think these 3 teams are the only true threats to win the national title this year. So thanks for joining us this week. We'd like to invite anybody that wants to watch our inaugural episode. It's in the description text. It'll give you an idea of what we're all about. All our social media platforms are listed below. If you have any questions or commentary, feel free to contact us. And if you have a player or team or topic you want to discuss, let us know. We're user-friendly. We're here for our viewers. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next week.
Cut.